From the children's section of the library in Baxter Village on the west side of Fort Mill, in the shadow of Charlotte, just a little too close to the buckle of the Bible Belt for my taste, and at the foot of Mount Belzoni, this is the York County Democratic Party YouTube show and podcast. We call it YCDP TV. I'm Gary Pierce, your host and producer, and yes, we're still at the library. That story is not over yet. We're calling this episode Book 'em, Danno. Okay, what's going on? Well, the headline is that the County Council hit a roadblock when the Library Board of Trustees announced that they were leaving all the books that Tom Audette and his backers wanted them to move. These are the books on sexuality and gender identity that were written for kids. The Library Board announced they were leaving those books right where they are, right here in the children's section. So Audette and some other council members hatched a new plan, or so it seems. They're working on a plan to replace several members of the library board. There's a motion in the works that would eliminate the 3 at-large members, cutting the board from 10 to 7 members. In this episode, you're going to hear about the shenanigans that some of the council members seem to be trying to pull to disguise their motivation for doing that. Another motion, passed by the council last meeting, booted out a couple more library board members who ended up living outside the district they were appointed to. That's when the district lines were redrawn back in 2022. They were dismissed immediately after that meeting, not even given a grace period to finish out their term. If the motion to eliminate the at-large positions passes at the July 17th County Council meeting, the council will be able to replace most of the library board members with, well, with who? I guess we'll have to see. But I think it's fair to say that some of the council members aren't too happy with that independent streak shown by the library board. Meanwhile, the York County progressive community is gearing up for battle in this culture war. They were well represented at the June 20th meeting of the county council, and a bunch of them addressed the council during public comments. We heard some interesting comments from the conservative side, too. Toward the end of this episode, we're going to play some edited clips of the comments from both sides. But first, I invited 6 of the people on the progressive side, people who stood before our various governmental bodies to express their opinions. I invited them to join me on this show. 2 of them have been on the show before. At County Council, they're limited to 2 minutes each. Here on the podcast, we can be a little more generous with our time. Everybody's busy schedules meant that we couldn't get them all in a Zoom call on the same night, so our panel is split between recordings made last Wednesday and last Thursday. So in a minute, I'll head back to the studio and we'll meet our brave public speakers. But first, I want to note that at the end of the show, we're going to ask as many of you as possible to show up at that July 17th County Council meeting over in York. That's when the council will have their final vote on the ordinance that would lop off those 3 at-large library board members. If you speak, you'll be able to ask the council to defeat that proposal. But even just being there will show them how unpopular the idea is. I'm going to put an index of sorts in the YouTube description for this show, so you can find all the topics we discuss and zip right to them. Okay, back to the studio. And I'll let you in on a little secret. I am in the studio. This is just a chroma key background. Fooled you, didn't I? This is our Wednesday night panel. And let's see, I'm going to start in the lower right, because Heather, you've been on the show once before. Well, actually, 2 of you have been on the show before. Heather and Katie have both been on the show before. But let's let the audience know just a little bit about who you are. Heather, your turn.
Sure. My name is Heather. I'm a recent transplant to the area. We got here just about a year ago now, actually, from Texas. And I'm a mother with 2 children, elementary and preschool age, and a wonderful husband who works remotely in the area. And just a citizen who used the library pretty much from the day we landed, is just concerned about what's going on and wanting to make sure our community stays as wonderful as it was when we first got here.
And Katie, tell me a little bit about yourself.
I have been a resident of York County for a little over 20 years. I came up here first for college at Winthrop and just kind of stuck around. I worked as a producer at Channel 9 for a couple years and just did some freelance stuff after that, and had some kids. I have 3 boys, all ages 8 and younger, and we live on the TGK side of Fort Mill. I love this area. I love our libraries. I brought my oldest to story time when he was 6 months old, so this library has been an integral part of my children's life, and I don't want to see that change.
Christine and Paige, tell me about yourselves.
Hi, my name is Paige. I am 17 years old. I attend the South Carolina Governor School for Arts and Humanities. I'm a visual artist. I am queer teen, and diversity in our libraries and in media is very important to me.
Christine, what about you?
Yeah, my name is Christina, and I'm Paige's mom. And I also have 2 sons, 14-year-old and a 10-year-old. I also live in TGK, and we've been here, since Paige was in first grade, so a long time now. This issue is important to me because having a daughter who is queer, the way that she is being portrayed, and other teenagers who, are like her are being portrayed, other children who are like her are being portrayed, is something that I feel it's very important to stand up and speak out and really speak the truth, because a lot of people just aren't getting it right.
And here is our Thursday panel.
So I'm Lacey Lane. I'm a mother of 2 in Fort Mill. I have an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. I'm a school counselor of 14 years. I do help organize a local group for public education. We're known as CAPE, Community Advocates for Public Education, which we're really here to try to combat misinformation and really be a support for local schools, and just to really make people aware and inspire some action when it comes to the anti-public education legislation that continues to come down the pipeline here in South Carolina.
And Elizabeth.
I have just recently moved back to the area. My husband and I both grew up in Charlotte, and we were living in New Jersey for many years for his work. And then he went fully remote during the pandemic. And so we decided to move home because we could. And we got back here, and I looked around, and, I've gotten kind of concerned. I'm not really usually one to get involved with a lot of stuff like this. But I saw in a group that I'm in, I saw the call for people to come to the library to counter protest. And I was like, oh, that's in 2 days. And I totally can do that. And I love the library, and I'm going to go.
So you thought you weren't an activist, and then it turns out you are, kind of.
I technically am doing activisty things, I guess.
Yep. I have made 3 of these programs about our little culture war going on here in York County now. But I'm afraid that anytime we start a program like this, we need to catch people up and explain what has happened so far.
It actually seems to have started about a year ago, when there was initially a request from Councilman Audette on behalf of some citizens of wanting to add books to the library, which the director at the time did honor. They added these books, and then it seemed to escalate at a certain point. And we're now at a point where we are looking at the attempt to change the size of the board of directors, and including threats to defund the library. That they can claim all they want, but it's in writing. There is the threat of them wanting to defund the library if they don't get what they want.
Council member Tom Audette has used the non-agenda item of the county council meeting to use it as an open mic night, I would say. He uses that time to express his concerns. He says there's like a public outrage about the content of books in our libraries.
In this book, you all have the pamphlet. It shows a girl and a boy talking in having this discussion on this page, and this page says to be a girl, to be a boy, or to be both, or to be neither. This is content that's in this libraries. And our kids and our grandchildren are seeing this content. To me, this is unacceptable.
Some of us here in the community noticed, then a larger body of our community became really concerned about this because he was stirring the pot with some extremists in the area who then started showing up to the meetings and echoing some of the talking points that he was sharing.
Sexually explicit content.
Sexually explicit books in the library.
Inappropriate books.
Sexually explicit material. Sexually inappropriate material.
Inappropriate materials.
A picture of a nude man.
Books that are unsuitable for children.
It kind of started as, he wanted to remove the books, but then I think he couldn't really get his way when it comes to removing them. So then he says, we're not going to remove them. Let's just relocate them. We'll take these inappropriate books from the youth section and we'll put them in the adult section. Therefore, there's some kind of parental guidance or whatever the logic is. Most recently, the ordinances that they're putting out, coming right on the heels of Audette's rants, are to remove the at-large members of our library board, which are 3 members.
Council to consider second reading of an ordinance to reduce the size of the county library board to 7 district-specific members appointed by council.
So that would cut our library board from 10 to 7. So if we remove those, we are removing 3 spots on this board that allow us to have a really diverse and inclusive board where lots of opinions and ideas can be shared when there are decisions to be made, like where can our librarians, the experts in their field, house the books. And there was also some proposals in regards to the redistricting that happened in 2022, and that all boards, if they have members that are no longer in their district due to the redistricting, that they're out and that those members would have to be replaced. So essentially, we're going from potentially, based on this third reading, from 10 to 7. We've lost already 2 members due to the redistricting. They're basically trying to reshape our board because they didn't like the board's answer. The board had a very well thought out statement. It was very respectful to both sides of the issue. It was evidence-based, it was factual, it was so thoughtful and intentional in the language they used. They didn't like it. They didn't like that they didn't get their way. So, that's kind of where these ordinances came in.
In that statement, the Library Board of Trustees basically said, the bottom line to me was, we're not going to move the books. Mm-hmm. We decided already when we put the books in where they should be. Mm-hmm. And we still think that's where they should be. And we're not going to move them. And so it would appear the county council is going to attempt to move the library board or remove the library board and replace them with people. This idea that the county council is removing people from the library board and replacing them or cutting the number down, is that speculation? Is that what we think is happening? They're not saying that's what they're doing. We wouldn't expect them to say that. We're pretty sure that's really what's happening.
The explanations that were given at the first reading were there's attendance issues, they're not able to meet quorum.
My understanding is the reason behind this is because they're having trouble with attendance.
I think in addition to helping with quorum and accountability, I support this.
And when we looked into the library board agenda notes, we saw that they didn't meet quorum one time, and that was January 22nd. So there's not really an issue with attendance or quorum that was cited without evidence to their fellow council members or the public. So they kind of stumbled through their explanation during that first reading. It was interesting to watch.
Any particular reason why we're removing it at large?
Well, I think we're going to be going through some other boards and commissions too. So we just started with this one because that's if we remove those at large, those 2 members who are in different districts will be able to reapply. Whereas right now they can't.
Like, first of all, that's not a reason. That's not a reason at all. Secondly, now I'm hearing that they're not making any cuts to any other boards.
But I heard you say, and we're going to go to other committees and do the same thing, which means we're going to remove the at-large.
No, not necessarily.
Well, Watts, we heard her say that too. Can we rewind the tape?
I think we're going to be going through some other boards and commissions too. So we just started with this one because that's...
So it was a lie and not a reason.
And at the subsequent readings, there weren't any explanations. Councilmember Roddy, Councilmember Huckabee implored the fellow council members to explain.
If we're going to reduce the library board, we best be reducing all of them tonight.
I haven't heard any reason why it would make sense to reduce the board from 10 to 7.
The timing of the ordinances, why is it important at this time after, all of this controversy was stirred up? why is this important right now to do? We've sent multiple emails and nobody's getting responses. And even Councilmember Roddy called them out on that the timing is just a little bit suspicious.
We should not be reducing our boards on the heels of the controversy of removing books. I do think it's ironic that the timing of this is not coincidental. If it's the right thing to do right now, it'll be the right thing to do in 6 months.
So I want to ask maybe a difficult question. I'm not sure. We'll see. As it stands now, the request has been to move books from the children's section to the adult section. People out there in the audience are going to say, that seems reasonable to me. We just want to move them. How bad could that be?
It makes these topics that aren't adult seem adult, and it makes them seem more forbidden.
A lot of the books that Councilmember Audette had talked about, Pink, Blue, and You, Be You, these are books that relate to gender identity, that relate to LGBTQ plus concepts in age-appropriate ways. And so if we're moving these books, we're telling our York County community that are LGBTQ plus that they're not appropriate. Them just being themselves is sexual and deviant and pornographic and just not okay for the youth section. And we know that's not true. Gender identity, LGBTQ plus concepts, these are just part of everyday lives for so many families in our communities.
A queer child that may need to see these books and that could open something up about their identity might never see these books just because they're not in the section that they're meant to be in.
Moving the books to a different section, so creating this segregated section of books, can put these children at risk too. On top of removing it from their access, if they do then go to this section, there's a very visual, physical cue that's now created of somebody accessing these books. You are labeling people just for walking into the section. And it sounds a little paranoid, but we've seen it happen before.
Anytime we're moving books from the youth to an adult section, while it's not an outright ban, it's essentially a ban. It's essentially censorship because we're removing the accessibility. And that's not okay. My children deserve to have library shelves that are diverse and inclusive.
We're not asking for a ban of the books.
If you are taking a book from the section it belongs in, you are removing it from that section. You've removed it from the place it is supposed to be.
They say they're not banning books, but everywhere else where books have started to be banned, this was the first step. I previously lived in Texas, and that's exactly how it's played out in libraries there in the smaller communities where libraries started with moving books, reviewing books, and now books are gone, and now sections are empty. And now libraries are shutting down.
Texas County has just voted to keep its entire public library system open after threatening essentially going nuclear and shutting them all down because they'd been ordered to unban a bunch of books, most of them for kids, like the classic In the Night Kitchen by Maurice Sendak. There was a lawsuit filed by some people who live in Llano when these books were banned, and a federal judge said, hey, it's actually not constitutional to ban them. He said, you got to put them back into circulation. So when that judge said, hey, put it back into circulation, some of these officials in this county said, we're going to just maybe shut down the library system instead.
That's a very real reality of this sort of step of control versus having an open community library where everybody is supported.
They did start originally by asking that all these books be removed from the library. And when they were made to go through the proper procedure that the library has had in place forever for reviewing books, and they were told, no, sorry, that's when the gears shifted. We have evidence of that was the plan, and we can track, through the past almost year and a half of how that's played out. The plan was to get these books out of here, or the library will be defunded.
And once it became more public was when that conversation shifted as well, as opposed to being in emails or in private conversations.
There are procedures in place for reviewing books, deciding where they're placed in the library. We need to trust that, and we need to stop trying to make that some sort of a political process, which is what's happening right now.
And if somebody doesn't want their child to read a book, the easy answer is you don't check that book out.
Sexually explicit material shouldn't be here. Great, it's not. There is no sexually explicit material in the children's library. Next complaint. Let's move on.
Let's explain why you can say that. I've seen stories on the TV news, in the local newspaper, on CN2, that showed a couple of these pictures that we have showed here on this podcast in the full, showing them in detail. And what we discovered
So this one is Pink, Blue, and You.
was that they were cartoon images with a few little lines and squiggles that barely represent male and female genitals, just a little bit, just the suggestion of them. And we saw one where Tom Audette said,
On here is a naked picture drawing of a naked man fully exposed, a naked woman fully exposed.
And what it turned out to be, the picture he was holding up, was a graphic of a male and a female with their internal sexual organs.
They don't want kids to know about those either.
The internal organs superimposed on the picture, but not actual, genital sex organs. There's no penis, there was no vagina there. And these were what Tom was saying were naked male, naked female, fully exposed. And when these pictures were shown on local TV news, they blurred them out. They didn't understand what was actually being shown. When I first showed some of these pictures, because some of them do show genitals, again, as little squiggly lines, and again, I'm showing the pictures to the audience now, I thought, I wonder if anybody is going to take us down from YouTube for showing these things. I wonder if anybody's going to complain. Well, maybe nobody's complained. Maybe nobody's seen them, but they're still sitting here on YouTube. YouTube hasn't had a problem with them.
I think I can thank Councilman Audette because I didn't know a lot of these books existed. I got to check out Pink, Blue, and You from the library and BU, and these are some really good books that led to some really great discussions with my kids. It tackled these really awesome comments, and the sections that talk about sex and identity, I was so grateful that such intention was put into the wording, into the illustrations to really make it so accessible for kids to understand, because these are concepts that, why, yes, I know generationally it can be confusing or, hard to understand because, maybe the older generation hasn't really had an opportunity to get to know people in their lives that have had experiences where their identity didn't meet their sex assigned at birth. And, if they haven't had somebody who walked that walk of life in their life, they might see a book like this and think, what is this? Nobody experiences this. But as a school counselor, as someone who has, a variety of friends of diverse backgrounds, there's no LGBTQ plus switch that turns on at middle school or turns on at high school or turns on at college. These kids exist very early on in life, and they need books that are mirrors and windows. They need books where they can see themselves. They need books where they can see, hey, I'm not the only one that feels that way. I'm not the only one that has thoughts or feelings of this nature. It pains me to think that people are seeing this very age-appropriate content and just spewing misinformation and rhetoric.
I'm a mom. Paige is my daughter. I also have 2 sons, and there are certainly books that I would or would not consider to be appropriate for them, but I don't feel I have the right to make that decision for every other parent out there.
There is a legal definition of pornography. Many of these books have been challenged by members of the community and asked for a review by the library experts. And the library has said, no, these are age appropriate. They're not obscene. They're not pornographic. And I think that people in the community need to remember that just because it's something you don't care for and it's not something that you want to talk to your child about at whatever age, other families get to decide other things. I'm okay talking to my children about people who are transgender and about drag queens. And, one of the books on the list that they are asking to be moved is called The Night Before Pride. And it's literally a book about LGBTQ pride before a pride festival and about drag queens. It's not about nudity. It's not about anything even sexual, or it's just about people living their lives and wanting to do so freely. If people are not ready to talk to their children about people in our community who are different from them, that's their choice, but that doesn't mean they get to make that choice for my family.
So of all the people that I've had on this program so far, the first person that I know for sure is queer is Paige. And you outed yourself at the at the county council meeting. Well, you didn't out yourself there, but you had, freely had talked about your sexuality.
My name is Paige Dayton, and I am a resident of Fort Mill, South Carolina. I attend the South Carolina Governor School of Arts and Humanities. I'm a straight A's honors student, and I'm also a queer teen.
Can you give us a little bit of background as to how you got to where you are and what books like this may have had in terms of an influence on you?
Yeah, absolutely. Growing up as a queer individual, queer representation in media was so important to me in order to find my identity and discover it, and in order to see other people like me. And I definitely wasn't looking at anything pornographic or sexual in that nature. I was just looking at media that represented queer people in queer relationships loving each other. It was definitely very age appropriate. It's just like showing your child a Disney film just with a queer couple. There's nothing pornographic or obscene about it. And it's no different from showing your child straight couples. And I think that it's so important that children are exposed to those things, because if they do turn out to be queer, then it's important that they see other people like them. And even if they don't turn out to be queer, it's important that they see queer people in media so that they can be more accepting allies when they do meet queer people in real life.
It's, again, 73-year-old guy. Very weird for me to use the word queer in a normal set of context of conversation. All of my life, that word was derogatory. It was something, was an epithet to hurl at somebody and to say, you're queer. That is your identity. Mm-hmm. At what age did you start to realize that you were different from, help me, Paige.
Maybe different from societal expectations? Yeah. I don't know.
Okay, let's go with that.
Or at what point did you become aware of what your identity was?
I was probably about 12 years old when I started to question it. And I mean, so I had been exposed to queer people all my life. Growing up, my aunt was married to a woman, and I was always told by my parents, oh, one day you might marry a man or a woman. And so for a while, I didn't really even question it. And it was just very normalized growing up. And I didn't even think twice about the fact that, oh yeah, I'm queer. Looking back, I feel like I probably always knew it. It was when I was 12 when I had the terminology to start describing these feelings, but I think it was probably always there in some sense or form. Obviously, I wasn't attracted to people when I was 5 years old, but when I thought about, oh yeah, I'll marry someone when I grow up, the thought of it being specifically a male or specifically a woman, neither of those ever crossed my mind. I just always thought, oh, it'll be a person that I love. So I don't know if there was a specific age where I realized it. 12 was about the age where I had the terminology to describe it, though.
Paige, did a book turn you gay?
No. And I mean, my response to that is I was exposed to 1,000,001 straight couples growing up. My parents are straight. Every Disney movie I ever watched had a straight couple. A lot of it was straight couples. And I'm not straight. So just like how all of that media did not turn me straight, seeing queer representation in a book is not going to turn you queer. Your identity is how it is. Or if you do realize you're queer after reading a book about a queer relationship, then you were always queer. It's not because the book turned you queer. The book just led to that realization. Queer kids are going to be queer whether they are exposed to it or not. They'll just be more oppressive of those feelings if they're not exposed to it.
I'll add to that too. Paige has two brothers, and they've been exposed to many of the same books and movies, and just life in general as her. And as far as we know, they are both straight. So I don't think anything that we've exposed our children to has turned them queer.
Paige, did you decide to become queer?
No.
It's not about what people choosing to be queer or, transgender or any variety of it. It's when they're choosing to live their life authentically as the person that they have always meant to be. Because I think in so many situations, they are terrorized by some of people in our community, some of the very ones who are speaking out in council meetings. So I think that is a bold choice for people to make.
When children are made to feel like they're outcasts just for trying to be the person that they are, or are made to feel that they have to hide the person that they are, from a mental health perspective, it's incredibly dangerous.
To explain the politics of it, a proposal goes through like this. You guys have called it an ordinance, and I think you know what you're talking about. It goes through 3 readings. It is proposed by a council member and read once.
Item number 5, council to consider first reading by title only of an ordinance to reduce the size of the county library board to 7 district-specific members appointed by county council.
They can vote to move it forward, or they can kill it at the time.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
In moving it forward, it's going to get 2 more readings. And at the second reading, there can be discussion. And that's what we heard at the last council meeting was the second reading. So the next council meeting, the third reading, and they'll decide its fate. Do we have a prediction of how that vote's going to go?
I don't know. I've continued to tell people to sign the petition and email. I was getting my hair done yesterday, and my hairdresser and the girl that shares her studio with her both live in Rock Hill, and they were very interested to find out what's happening because they didn't know. They had no idea.
Most people out there in York County have no idea this is going on.
I think there's a difference between the prediction of how the vote will go and our hope. So, if we go by the first and the second reading, it might continue to be that 5-2 vote. My hope is that our council members are seeing the attention that this issue is drawing from the community. They see that the attention they are garnering for this issue is not positive. It is not being well received by a majority of the community. The side that is in opposition of these age-appropriate books in the youth section had a petition of about 80 signatures is what we obtained in the FOIA for Tom Audette's email. But if you look at the one that is, spreading like wildfire in our community, we've got over 900 York County residents that have signed that want our shelves to remain diverse and inclusive in our youth section. So the majority is becoming aware and they are making their voices heard. So my hope is that the council does listen and just doesn't pander to that loud and persistent minority. And I get it. They're the ones that show up to vote consistently. They're the ones that maybe help out with their campaigns. So I understand why they stir that culture war pot. It just makes these at-risk communities part of their political game. It makes our library board members, Tamara and April, who were nixed of their positions with that ordinance, it makes them a part of their game. It makes everyone part. All of us going up there to speak and taking time out of our days. We are all part of their political game.
They're not listening and they're not responding to the questions of, why are you doing this? Which really makes it, kind of blaringly obvious why they're doing this. They're doing this to get their way.
I'm hoping that there is still a chance it will go to where they hold the board's number the same. Removing the at-large, I think, is an incredibly short-sighted stance. Not even, if we just take all the politics out of it, York County is explosively growing. And by having those at-large seats, you have the chance to ensure that when district shifts happen, because they're going to continue happening, that you have some continuity of people carrying over to continue having a quorum. The less people you have, the more likely it is that you won't. That was a frustrating thing, is that the only argument I have heard for reducing the board size that was initially presented was that they had not been making their quorum, which was patently false. It was shown that there's only once that they haven't made their quorum. I'm also concerned that the political aspect that's now been brought into this and the animosity that's now been brought into this will make it harder to fill empty positions, because I can't say that I would want to take the heat that the Library Board of Directors has been taking recently. And kudos to them, because nobody's left. They're all still there. They're all still doing their job. even the ones who know they're not going to be returning. They didn't walk off the minute things got difficult. And then let's say, so the next progression is, so now a new section is created, new steps are taken, books start being removed or reviewed en masse. Where's the money for that coming from? They've talked about funding and wanting to defund it. Well, you defund it, the first things that go are the additional programming that the community benefits from. They do animal encounters. They have homeschool support groups. They have a meeting room that is available for anybody in the community to use privately or publicly. It can either be put on the public schedule, or if your group has a very specific affiliation, you can go in and use those rooms anyway. They don't deny you that room. It's just whether it ends up on the publicly announced calendar or not. But all these resources available to our community, if there's defunding and there's this stress put on the system and you have less people to do more work, things are going to start getting cut. And it's not just one side that suffers in that scenario. It's the whole community that loses resources over what should be a non-issue. Because again, there's a process in place. There's things that have been working up to this point. The council, I think, is setting up a powder keg for a really bad collapse of our library is what I see. It sounds a little alarmist, but again, I came from Texas. That's exactly what plays out.
A small group of people, honestly, got really loud and now may effectively get their way with the library. Well, I can promise you that for every other board that's out there, every other situation you can think of, there's a group of people willing to get loud. How many boards does this ultimately affect, and how much extra work is the council then putting on themselves? Because suddenly they are supposed to be watching everything through a lens, when really they should be putting people in place who can be trusted to do that job on their own.
If they started coming after the board I'm on, like they've been coming after the library board, I don't know that I would have the fortitude to stick around. These are volunteers. They're not paid for this job to feel that, axe hanging over your neck, so to speak.
Again, it's this small group of very vocal people that are getting their way. They're stomping their feet. In some cases, they may be throwing money towards campaigns. They're getting loud. They're showing up at every single meeting. We should be able to speak out. We should be able to share our opinions. But if you really are, if you're going to sit on a council, you should also be willing to listen to both sides and make rational decisions based on what's best for the community, and not a group of people that just continues to, get loud all the time and demand that things be done exactly how they want them to be done.
You said that you had some plans that are cooking that you would be able to tell us about.
We do have some plans that are cooking.
We want to be able to get more of the community involved than just our little group, or even the York County Democratic Party, the constituents in that party. What's coming up?
So I think we're kind of to this point where we really just can't sit back anymore. I think people tend to get passionate and angry about things. They might share a few memes in their social media groups or on their social media, or they might send a frustrated text to a friend or family member. But memes and texts are not going to make change. I think we're to the point where if we want to make changes in our community, we have to be change makers. So one of the things that we're going to do in CAPE and hopefully with the York County Democratic Party Facebook page as well, is we're going to be sharing some action steps. We're going to work our way through that ladder of engagement. We're going to start small, and we're going to start on July 10th. And so what's going to happen is you're going to see an action step challenge each day, and you're going to get to learn a little bit more about what's at the crux of these library issues, what's going on with our county council. And each day we're going to give just a little task. Maybe it's sharing something on social media. Maybe it's signing and sharing the petition that we have to support our libraries. And we're going to step it up each and every day. And we know that we're all in different seasons of our life. We all have different things going on this summer. There's things we can do, and there's just things we might want to do but can't for various reasons. So our ask is that people step up in the ways that they're comfortable, in the ways that they can. So we can show the York County Council that our community cares and supports our York County Library, our York County Board of Trustees, and that we want to support them. And we don't want them to interfere with the way that they make decisions. We don't want them to interfere with their day-to-day operations and what's on the shelves. And we certainly don't want them to marginalize our LGBTQ plus communities. We've got youth, we've got families in our community, and they deserve to feel safe in that space. So we want to invite everyone to join CAPE, Community Advocates for Public Education. We're a Facebook group, and we basically break down the legislation and what's going on into digestible pieces and share action steps. So it's a way to raise awareness. It's a way to take action steps. If you're not interested in joining that group, maybe you're already part of the York County Democratic Party's Facebook group, in which we'll be sharing those same action steps as well. So I hope that viewers that are really interested in supporting our library can tune in starting July 10th. Don't wait. If you want to go ahead and send some emails to the York County Council, let them know your thoughts. By all means, go ahead and do that. But we're going to give you lots of other things that you can do to take action on this issue as well. I think a lot of us care, but we don't always know what to do. So our goal is to really make it easy for people to take action within our community in ways that feel comfortable to them and ways that they're able to do. And I think we're all trying to keep our head above water. And, some days are easier to engage in activism than others. And engage in activism sounds big and scary. But I think what Elizabeth learned as she ripped that Band-Aid off at her first county council meeting and she spoke.
I am a parent, and I'm here in objection to the reduction of library board seats and censorship of children's books.
She rocked it, and now she's feeling empowered and feeling excited to do it again. She says this, but she's like, yeah. I think the more you show up, the more comfortable you get, and the more you might be able to do so. I just say join us, give it a shot. I would love to see this community come together in support of our libraries.
Since most people out there watching have not seen the county council, we'll give you a little bit of a taste of it. At the last county council meeting, the Republican side, the conservative side talked for about 9 minutes, and you're going to see about a 2-minute clip that kind of distills that. And then our side actually had more people on there to talk. And I think we went about 15 minutes. We used up pretty much all of our time. I've cut that down just because attention spans are short to about 9 minutes. And so let's look at the Republicans, the conservative side first.
Many of your constituents attended the subsequent library board meeting to protest this egregious disregard of the well-being of our children and were turned down by a 6-0 decision. It was clear that my tax dollars would be used to fund decisions made by this board that were not overseen by my elected officials. In other words, these appointed positions were being funded by my tax dollars to act autonomously.
How do we even justify having this material in the library at all?
God declares that you, as the county council, are a delegated authority. You're God's servant, you're God's deacon, to carry out justice, not according to your own pragmatic thinking, but according to God's law. And friends, if you've read some of these books, then question, I don't know how much more evil you can get than exposing innocent children to these things. There's one right and there's one wrong.
I wanted to ask all of you to think back when you used to take your children to Blockbuster. Maybe the book cover, the movie cover was sexually explicit, or maybe it had a word on there I didn't want my child to read. All we're asking is that sexually explicit materials are moved into its own section. It is a federal crime to expose a 16-year-old or under to obscene materials.
We're not asking for a ban of the books.
How do we even justify having this material in the library at all?
We're asking for reason. Federal law prohibits the distribution of sexually explicit material to minors in every form of media. County council, library board members, library committee members, librarians may be guilty of trafficking, transferring, or attempting to transfer pornographic material to minors. In TGK, we're currently researching any schools that are in our purview under the law. If this exists in those schools, we're going to take legal action. And I hope this county doesn't have to face the same.
Oh, wow. We've been threatened. Lawsuits. They're coming for us. All right, let's see how you guys responded.
I am a parent, and I'm here in objection to the reduction of library board seats and censorship of children's books. I've watched all the videos of recent meetings, and have heard no compelling argument for either proposal. I heard someone say that they think they're planning on cutting some of the other boards, so you figured you'd just start with the library board, and that doesn't really seem like a reason at all to me. And then someone else said something about not meeting quorum, but I've been told that happened once like a year and a half ago, so that also just sounds like an excuse. As far as the censorship of children's books, we know that comprehensive education about the bodies that we all have helps to keep children safe from sexual abuse. The evidence for this is so overwhelming, in fact, that it's actually a major red flag if people think children shouldn't have that necessary information and education. We are all well aware of the fact that right now extremist groups are doing this exact same thing everywhere to take over library boards and censor information so they can try to force everyone to live the way that they do. And nobody believes that the close timing of these things is coincidental.
I was a special education teacher for 10 years. So I never had a student that was the same, no matter if they had the same diagnosis. Everybody was different. We should be supporting them more, not less. I had to be able to explain answers to all kinds of questions in many different ways to all kinds of kids over my 10 years. From a student not knowing the word apron in order to read a story about cooking and to understand that, I had people asking if sloths were real because they never had seen a sloth. So was it make-believe because they'd never seen it? We need to support the differences, and it's sad that a person was born into this world differently by no fault of their own, and they have an even harder time getting through life. No one should be hated or feared because of their differences, even if a person might not agree, even if they don't understand.
I respectfully request a clear and open explanation for the removal of the seats because this ordinance appears calculated and narrow-minded in light of recent controversies. The county has several boards with at-large members. Those seats are an important addition to ensure well-rounded and diverse perspectives in areas where advocacy, expertise, and public trust are needed, like the library board. Removal of these seats, as well as redistricting the seats, puts the board in immediate upheaval. I ask that you leave our libraries and library boards to be governed by experts in their field.
Like others in our community, I've been paying close attention to the county council meetings in recent months. I'm concerned about the ordinance to reduce the number of library board members from 10 to 7 and the clarification of conditions for membership that had its first readings on June 5th and second readings snuck in during a special session meeting on June 13th. These changes would remove and/or replace half of our current library board. A reasonable rationale for such drastic changes has not been shared by the council. Issues with the library board member attendance, a history of not meeting quorum were cited, but no proof of this was shared with council members or the public. According to the library board minutes, the library board did not meet quorum one time, which was January 22nd. How does not meeting quorum on one date necessitate this ordinance? The first two readings of the ordinance came on the heels of repeated comments made by a council member regarding library content, regarding concerns that are based on their personal ideologies. So the timing is a little bit suspicious. I hope you will clarify the rationale tonight and that all board members give the true reasoning for these ordinance and their timing great consideration before making their final vote. I fully support our York County libraries and our Board of Trustees. Their statement regarding keeping diverse and inclusive materials on the shelves of our libraries that can be accessed by youth was thoughtful, evidence-based, and compassionate towards all sides of the issue. Please note that the petition to keep our library shelves rich with diverse and inclusive materials now includes the signatures of 844 York County residents.
I find it concerning that there has been so much interference with what's going on with the reduction of the seats. Feels like it is a calculated move on the part of the loudest in our communities. It's been through my kids' journey, teaching them and learning with them that I learned to accept who I was, and I wish I had these books in the library when I was a kid. It would have saved me a lot of heartache. Reading a book doesn't create queerness, and it's very well documented that kids who understand their bodies are much less at risk for any kind of abuse. These books aren't the evil.
How much more evil you can get.
That some people are saying that they are.
When my family and I moved to Fort Mill 6 years ago, I certainly never imagined I would be having to speak in front of county council to express support for our public libraries. Frequently, they're underfunded and underappreciated, and today they've become battlegrounds. As a kindergartner, my oldest learned the Dewey Decimal System and how to find books in the children's area, how to search on a computer for keywords, and if he couldn't find what he was looking for, how to ask a librarian. I, as his parent, was always near him, with him, knew what he was looking for. If I didn't like it, I could tell him that was not something we needed to check out. This was a skill that he needed to learn and master for himself.
My name is Paige Dayton, and I am a resident of Fort Mill, South Carolina. I attend the South Carolina Governor's School of Arts and Humanities. I'm a straight-A's honors student, and I'm also a queer teen. I'm here today in support of our Library Board of Trustees' recent decision to keep books that some residents may consider controversial
With sexual and inappropriate content.
In the juvenile section.
Right in the path of unsuspecting children.
Our libraries must always be a safe space to members of the community to visit, and it is important that they understand that this community is diverse, and children especially benefit when they see themselves in the pages of these books. Even if, especially if, her identity does not align with what some may consider societal norms. Even when a child's identity does align with these societal norms, the child benefits by seeing diversity in books. This teaches love and acceptance of those who are different, something that is sorely lacking in our world today. None of this is about indoctrination. It is not pornographic, it is not evil. A child's identity will not change based on a book that they read. What will change is their acceptance and understanding. Children need to hear that they matter, their situation or family or self is not abnormal, and that they are valued. That is what a book can do, and it's why access to these books needs to remain as it is, without changes to how these books are cataloged or where they are located inside the walls of the library. As a teen, this is important to me, and it should be important to the adults who are in my life and my community too. This push to move books reflects a resurgence of fear and intolerance that doesn't benefit our society or the children who live here. Is this really the message that you want to spread? I would hope not. It's not protecting us, it's hurting us. I ask that you please support our library board's decision by keeping the makeup of the board as is. Please do not vote to reduce the number of board members or try to gain further control over the qualified, educated, and independent voices.
I am a mom. I'm also an adjunct instructor at a South Carolina university where I teach a critical reading class in which we discuss topics related to the human experience, including topics considered both politically right and politically left. One of the topics that we discuss is the freedom to express and discuss ideas.
There's one right and there's one wrong.
Your proposal to reduce the number of members on the library board reduces the number of diverse voices on the board. So you're reducing the number of diverse opinions that you can take into account.
There's one right and there's one wrong.
I ask that when you are making these appointments, that you make sure that there are diverse voices in your appointments and that you don't just go with the people who you agree with.
Oh, you guys are my heroes. You guys here on this show and the Thursday night panel and all the folks who have spoken at the county council, at the library board, that's not necessarily easy to do. You got to gin up some courage to do that. You guys are my heroes.
I would love for everyone watching who supports our library to show up and support on July 17th for that next county council meeting, 6 p.m. in York. But we're not all going to be able to be there. If I'm being honest, I can't be there.
If you want to go to that meeting, July 17th, however long it takes you from whatever part of the county you live in to drive to York. The meeting starts at 6 and they're usually pretty prompt. So I'd plan on being there by 5:30. So whatever it takes to get through rush hour and get there about 5:30. You'll find a clipboard that has the 15 slots for people to sign up. And if there's some time open and you think you want to talk, you just sign your name on that clipboard. If there's 15 people signed up, each person gets 2 minutes to talk. So that's a total of 30 minutes. And that happens pretty close to the beginning of the meeting. And if you want to bail after that, you can. But some of the decisions and the vote on this issue will take place potentially quite a bit later in the meeting. So if you want to stick around and actually see that happen, then you'll need to stick around. And
I'll be there.
Yeah. Also point out that This revolution is televised. It's live on YouTube. So if you can't be there for the meeting, go to YouTube and search York County Council, and it'll show you their YouTube channel, and it's pretty easy to find the live video, and then you can watch it.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Griffith. I'm a resident of Fort Mill. When my family and I moved to Fort Mill 6 years ago, I certainly never imagined I would be having to speak in front of county council to express support for our public libraries. Public libraries.
All the stuff that I've shown you from those meetings has just been scraped from their YouTube channel. Very handy. Well, you are all my heroes. So thank you very much for coming on here and telling us your story. And we'll be mixing this up with the folks that we talk to tomorrow night. I'm not sure how this is all going to turn out, but we will find out. But thank you for being here. Lacey and Elizabeth, thank you very much for coming on this YCDP TV show. But even more, thank you for letting us make this show a vehicle for the action that you're trying to gin up and get started. Really appreciate your being here.
Thanks for covering all of this and for all of your information already. I got caught up on the whole thing watching the previous episodes, and I made my husband watch them.
Oh, you're the one.
Sent them to some other people.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Oh, I love the cat crawling all over Katie.
We made it right to the end before it happened.
Yeah.
There's one right and there's one wrong.